What's up everyone, welcome back to another video. In this video I'm gonna talk about the new style of the progressive. I mean, it's not that new, but very popular one, and something that I call Deep Progressive Psytrance. And I'm gonna show you how you can tweak and how you can create an interesting and nice sounding groove. When with groove I mean the whole drum section. So in this video, as I already said, I'm gonna show you how you can create something sounding like this. And if I rewind the drums and everything. Even though maybe on the first listen it doesn't sound that different from what we usually do, but there are certain things which are kind of characteristic for this style. So let's start with the kick. So I use the kick 3 in this position, and I'm gonna go like the effects, EQ, everything is disabled. From the sub there is like the typical pitch down, but as you are able to see, like the main thing about this is that we're not gonna start from the 20k like we maybe gonna start if we are creating the kicks for the full-on or a little bit faster type of the music, or maybe this uplifting progressive where we're gonna use this kind of high frequencies to provide a better or bigger punch. So the characteristic of this style is that it's kind of deep, which means the kick and the bass are not gonna play that much in the mid and high frequencies, and the main characteristic is they're going to be kind of low end oriented, which means they're gonna provide a kind of deeper feeling and the psychoacoustic effect that's gonna kind of, the focus will go, if we listen to the kick and the bass only, we're gonna hear them only in the low frequencies. Not only, of course, there is this dot at the beginning because it's very typical for the Psytrance, but it's very, very short. And if we see the analyzer, we're not gonna see like the huge bump on the mids or on the high frequency. Even though this kick is a bit punchier for this style, it can be even lower, but this is something which I found very useful and very good sounding for this type of the track. So what I did, I started from 7.1k, and then the pitch is going like it's going down. And if you can replicate something sounding like this, it's not that important, and there is no certain formula how you can do so, how you can create a great sounding kick. So this is something that I always try to say and to kind of make it as an important part. So fixing your environment or listening conditions is something that is the most important. Again, converters, speaker, and the room are something that's very, very important when it comes for the response that you're gonna hear, because if there's a certain error in the chain, we're not gonna be able to hear the best possible or the accurate results. So if you don't have speakers that are able to produce the low end, and even though if you have the curved low end, let's say that 50 hertz is lower for 5 or 10 dB in comparing with 100, then we're going to tend to increase that low end because our ears, they want to hear these kind of frequencies. And if the speakers are curved, then we need to kind of compensate that. And altogether, we're going to get a bit kind of confusing effect, and we're going to get confused. We're not going to be able to understand what exactly we are doing. So we're going to try so many different things, and in the end it might be that your listening environment is not good enough. Now when it comes to the headphones, I heard this so many times, and I tried the Audi's LCDX, and now I bought the VSX. They are very, very good for mixing. When I say mixing, I talk about the levels, a little bit of the frequency response, but I got very, very disappointed in both of these headphones, as if I flip the phase and if I'm kind of doing a certain sound design processes, there are many, many things that I weren't able to hear. So even though that I was bypassing like the full chain of like 6, 7, 8 plugins that I mostly use for processing my punchy Psytrance kicks, I didn't hear even like 5% difference, while if I listen and hear that if I bypass everything and hear like the plain like kick 3 synthesis, and if I turn on all the processing afterwards, it's a night and day difference. So I would say that headphones are can be used for mixing. And when I say mixing, I mean levels and everything, while sound design, in my opinion, they are very, very bad. And I wasn't able to even hear or notice certain differences which are kind of changing the sound on a bigger scale. Anyway, so it's a kind of softer kick, and there are one particular technique which I want to say that it's kind of the best thing that you might hear in this video. So I'm using Nerve, and because it's an easy like step sequencer, I set it here to be like only 1/4 of the length, and then I can just click over here and set it to be played. And then if I go load and load one sample from the folder, it's gonna load. In this case, it's a hi-hat. And then if I just go next, it's gonna load the next sample in that folder, which is kind of very, very useful. As well, I can put straight away like the processing, the effects on top, and I can hear all the samples that I have in my personal library, how they're gonna sound and how they're gonna translate with the rest of the elements. Now, the kick that I use, I really, really dig and really, really like to put the hi-hat on top of the kick. So I'm gonna create, it's not going to be like additional channel, it's going to be like the part of the kick. Because this kick, it sounds very nice, but I somehow very, I don't know, I just don't like the sound of the sine wave when it's playing on these higher frequencies. So the kick on, there is something like the mid punch is kind of okay, but there is certain type of the plasticness which I really don't like, and I really like to put some type of the hi-hat on top of it, and then like to cover or to mask that high frequency response from the sine wave. So if I play this with this hi-hat, and I chose this hi-hat because it sounded very nice, so but we can hear it now that it sounds as the hi-hat on top of it, and there's not much of the difference, and it doesn't sound like a part of the kick, it just sounds like a hi-hat on top of the kick. But with the compression, we can actually create something that's going to be like a small punch on top of the kick, which is going to sound as a part of the kick. So what I'm doing, usually I put the threshold all the way down, like to the maximum, and then like release, I'm gonna keep it 35 milliseconds, and the main thing is just increasing this attack point over here. So if I play now, so the compression is very, very high, so we cannot even hear it. So just by increasing the attack, so now by increasing the attack, we are allowing a certain part of the hi-hat to pass through the compression, and then it's gonna get closed. The same thing we can do with the envelope, but for some reason I was never able to make a good sounding results of the hi-hat on top of it just by reducing the length of it and putting the fade out. For certain reason, it's way easier for me just to play with this knob over here and to find the best sounding result, while it's very, very more difficult if we just try to extend the length of the hi-hat and play with the envelope. And specifically like this hi-hat that I loaded, it already had a certain length, so if I play with the ADSR here, it's not going to be the same length if I load the next hi-hat on top of it. While if I set, let's say, the attack, it's going to be exactly like, let's say, 50 milliseconds for this particular hi-hat. This is the best sounding result in my opinion. So it's like without, it sounds very, very nice. There's this hi-hat on top, which is kind of the noise, which is the type of the waveform which we are able to hear in the nature always. There's a lot of noises around, while sine wave, like the pure sine wave, does not exist in the nature. So it always sounds a bit artificial, or I don't know, like a plastic, or not natural that much. So for me, it's very important that I have this kind of top end or anything on top of the kick that will just produce this type of the reflection or certain natural sounding effect, as it's going to help me to listen to this kick for a very long time. And if I listen only this plain sine wave, I don't know, I just get bored, and in my opinion it doesn't sound that natural. So I have a problem of listening it for a very long time while I'm building this track further on. So Anyway, after this, I'm always bouncing, and from the processing, there's not much. There's a little bit of EQing where I boosted certain frequency, which I reduced a bit later on. I added a little bit on 400, and I'm kind of shaping it and fixing certain irregularities. And I don't know, like 150 was too loud in this point. And I added like the sub synth, which is just producing a little bit of the lower frequencies, and I extended to 31% through the 36 to 56 hertz in this position, and sub harmonics are on the 50%. I'm not using the global and I'm not using the edge. I'm always using just to create additional frequencies on the kicks or the bass line. It really depends. So do I do that always? No, I don't do that always, but I like to always to try and see what type of the results I might get. And so about all the processes, I'm gonna try to add them and then hear and listen. If they produce the sound which I like, I'm gonna keep them. If not, I'm gonna look for some other ones. But I'm able to do it because I fixed my listening environment, and I have a very accurate signal. I have full range. I can hear 50, 40, even 30 hertz in this room. And if I play with these very low frequencies, I'm gonna hear the different results. So after all that processing, like I have this sound, and then I had like GEQ, where I just reduce the 50 hertz for 0.5 and 63 for -1. And these type of the things is when I look to the analyzer. I really want to have all these first three, like 50, 63, and 80, kind of flat, because I believe this is the best possible response that is going to be translated to in different tracks as well. So in this track, it might sound, when it combines with the bassline in G, that sounds good. But if they are not kind of flat that much, I might have a problem, and then I will need to apply this process in some other tracks. So because I'm saving always when I create something that sounds very, very nice, and I really like this type of the kick, so I'm gonna bounce it and I'm gonna set it in the folder, and I created a new folder like soft kicks, soft psytrance kicks, which I'm going to use in this type of the softer tracks. Now, when it comes to the bass line, I used Oberheim OBX, which is kinda of emulation of the analog sounding synths. And for this type of the music, there's going to be a lot of using of all these analog sounding synths, and people that are making producers that are making this type of the music, they also buy like analog hardware synths, and they like to play and create a different type of the synthesis, while you can do exactly the same with the VST instruments because they are more budget friendly. So the bass line, basically it's initialized preset, just the saw, the cutoff position is on 75, and resonance is on 0. There's no modulation, or there is no envelope on it, so the bassline sounds like this. After that, there's a quadrafuzz 1, which I'm using to the J bridge, and you can look for the information how you can apply it. I even saw that Aja made it to work in Ableton on Mac. I don't know how he did it, but I guess it's some type of the Windows simulation or whatsoever. And after that, I have PHJ 979, where I'm just controlling the phase when I'm gonna be finding the best sounding phase position in correlation in the depending on the kick as well. And then after that, I have only the ducking effect, which is not going all the way down. And then I have another one, like just so both of them together. Together with a kick. Now, when it comes to the hi-hats, the best is if you can use and find the samples from 909, 808, like the Roland. You can install even the VST instrument or whatsoever, because this type of the drum machines, or you can buy, of course, the hardware drum machine, or you can buy some other samples. They're gonna have a bunch of these type of the hi-hats, and they kind of sound the best because this style of the music is kind of analog sounding type of the psytrance music, where we're going to use like older samples, but we're going to of course do the processing, the modern processing, so it's going to sound way better. So the first close hi-hat it's from 909, I personally love using Stylus Remix. It's one of my first bought VST instruments. Do I have the instance loaded in here? I don't think so, but anyway, so it's a Stylus Remix. It's very old one. It's also from Spectrasonics, the same company that is making the Omnisphere. So if I go to default, if I go to sound menu, if I go to the hi-hats, I'm gonna have this 808, 909. So all these old hi-hats, I'm gonna have bright ones, I'm gonna have the claps and snares, like, which are also kind of retro sounding ones, and they will translate to this track very good. So then I'm gonna use the clap, which is kind of also from 808. I use that from the Roland TR 808, I think so. 808, yes. So from the drum machine, so I use from this part. And then I use the clap from there, and I also added the snare. The snare is again from Stylus, because Stylus has a lot of these retro sounding snares. So they combine together. Again, I bought the VSP Avenger. This is kind of type of the EDM, like there's a kick with a ride hitting at the same time, but I applied like a huge high pass filter and just like use these high frequencies. Again, I use like another layer of the close hi-hat, like this is the loop from Stylus again. And again, I had this cowbell, which is going on the filter with a certain modulation with the echo board on it. Without it. And with. So in general, it's a way more easier style. It's kind of way deeper. There's not going to be like it's not a typical arrangement. I am used to make this type of the music similar to it like years ago, and also like I do produce like the original psychedelic psytrance music, which used to be invented, let's say, from 2000s, just before that, even like with artists like Atmos, Andromeda, Antiques, and other people that used to release for the Spiral tracks, for Iboga a bit later on, and similar type of the labels. So that was kind of insights about this type of the style, since I already created and it sounds very nice. I just decided to share it with you, and I hope that you like it, and see you soon with another video. Bye.